It is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Sean Fitzgerald sent me that, so representing the dark film.
Yeah.
Right, you just take its time. So,
It's shown live on my phone.
oh. Right, let me just have a look. If anybody's out there watching this, can you leave a comment? Just let me know. See if it is working. It's up here. Oh, it is, yes. Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today with a live stream discussing our favourite films. This time it's discussing our favourite World War II films. I'm joined again by Steve Stark and Jon Davies, who are authors of a number of books. Jon is author of a crime novella called Muscle, which you can find linked in the description. And Steve is author of two books, one a novel called A Hot Dose of Hell, and also a collection of three stories called Violent Ends, all of which are in the description below as well. And we will also be joined by another regular, Stephen Stoppard. However, he's having technical difficulties, as am I.
Oh, he's off.
And on that note, he's gone. Yeah, so
famous last words.
Yeah. I think maybe this is taking the spirit of World War II, perhaps with the technology fails or something.
Yeah, good point.
So hopefully Aaron shouldn't be too long.
Should we crack on? Do you want to tell us about yours?
Yeah, we can give him a minute, can't we? I think and just see what. I mean, how easy was it for you to pick your films? You know,
I was torn between a few. I'm not an authority in any way. I don't feel like I know that many. I remember when I was growing up, a lot of the war films were Vietnam War films. And there was a little spate of World War II films towards the end of the sort of 90s and the odd one here and there. But mostly that seemed to be the trend.
Yeah.
When, like 80s and 90s, I would have said that's most of what you saw. So I haven't seen too many World War II films. And I know I'm not going to have any knowledge of some of the ones that Aaron's going to come out with. Aaron's going to come out with some classics that I've never heard of, probably. Yeah. All mine are quite modern picks. Yeah. What about yourself?
Similar in a way. I'm not an authority on Second World War films at all. Mine are probably the slightly earlier ones. They're the ones that I can remember watching on a Saturday afternoon with Grandad, things like that. So they're of that era, I suppose. So perhaps maybe some of the classic, more classic ones. But yeah, I'm by no means an authority on them. I've not seen a lot of the modern ones. There's still a couple of World War II films I've not seen. Some of the newer ones as well.
Welcome back, Aaron.
Hello, mate.
And Stephen's here as well, so let me just get Stephen.
Hi, good.
Yeah, good.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think it might be best this time to not use the images, as they seem to be causing havoc as well. So, right, so let me just waiting for Stephen to reappear. What I'll do is I'll go through some of the Right, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try it on my phone instead of on this laptop. So if you could just, as you
keep it going, mate.
Keep talking.
Yeah,
no worries.
No. You sound like a teacher, Aaron. Chat amongst yourselves, chat amongst yourselves.
We'll get our hand in a minute, though. I'll start swearing again.
As quick as possible.
So, Jon, we were saying about if we had difficulty choosing a favourite. Was there one that you left off that you were sort of torn with?
No, I don't think there was actually. they were fairly
straightforward.
straightforward picks overall. Yeah. Out of my favourites, if I sort of judged mine on ones that had lasted for repeat viewings, so the ones that I'll always watch if they're on TV. You know, if they're on Channel 5 or something, they normally end up on Channel 5 or BBC 2 on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. And if I'm about, I'll always sit down and watch them. So that's my kind of measure for it. There was one that probably didn't. Yeah, perhaps one that sort of just fell off the list, but I haven't seen it for a while. That was Kelly's Heroes. I haven't seen that one for ages.
Is that Eastwood?
Yeah. I remember enjoying it when I've seen it a couple of times. But yeah, I think that was the only one that perhaps come into the top three or edged towards the top three. Yeah. What about yourself? Is any of that?
Yeah, I was almost had Memphis Belle. Don't know if you've seen that one.
I've not seen it. I've not seen that one. I know it's Matthew Modine and Eric Stoltz, is it?
Yeah, and it's quite a cast of guys from around that sort of time, and it's a good one. It's about the guys on the bomber. You see them go through some of the training, and then they get sent out on a mission. Yeah. And it's just a solid movie at a time when we weren't really making that many war movies, certainly not World War II movies. So I like that one a lot. So that was like, could have been my third or fourth pick, and it just sort of got nudged out in the end because I thought I had more to say about the others. Yeah. What are like some of the modern ones then that you've missed that you haven't got around to that you wanted to see?
Hacksaw Ridge.
Same.
I've not seen all of it. I've seen about the first half of that, and then I can't remember why it was. I've never watched the whole thing. Fury is another one as well. David Ayer's Fury, but again about half of it. So need to settle down and watch those ones. Trying to think of some others that. No, I think it's those two. Those two are the ones that kind of stand out for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
There's one that's popped up on Netflix. I think it's. I don't know if it's set in the Winter War in Finland. Sisu, is it? I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't seen that either, but Nick Horvath always raves about that one. He loves that one.
Right.
Yeah. It's quite a badass, quite a like comic booky kind of mad one where he's kind of a one-man army.
Yeah.
The Nazis mess with him. I can't remember. They take something away from him, some gold or something like that, and he just goes after him, and it's like really over the top action movie. I haven't seen it yet, so I need to get around to it.
Right. Things seem to be a lot easier on my phone, at least with this going through. So I'll go through all the comments that we've got so far. So there. Yes.
Sean, good man.
Sean.
Hey, Sean.
We've got another. This gentleman is another book trooper who is also a clergyman, which is unusual for book trooper, and a former lawyer, I think, as well. Just right, and John's here. Hello, John. One of the films that you mentioned on our spy live stream, when you asked me if you thought it was a spy film, is going to show up on here. So, well, you may be. That may happen. One of those is definitely going to show up. I won't say which, but and then I enjoyed both of those, but they're not on the. I should say they're not on anybody's list. So
there's two more that I haven't seen. I haven't seen those two.
Yeah, same. And Eastwood's an amazing director as well as an actor, isn't he? I love his movies.
It's so consistent, isn't he, as well? So what's he now? 90? Still, making films. Really consistent.
Just for a second. So, Steve, you wanted to start with Thin Red Line. Okay, just bear a second. Just see if I can get it on. Right. Sorry about this. I had to work out this. I've never done it before on here.
I can start talking about it if you want, mate.
Yeah, okay, that's what. Yeah.
So Thin Red Line is late 90s war movie, World War II movie, and it's about the US forces fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. It's a very interesting one. I like it, and it's very visually striking. It's got an amazing cast, and it's very unique in its style. It's got an interesting style of storytelling where it focuses on a character and then it goes into their like internal monologue. So you're sort of hearing their point of view at the same time as what they're doing. I normally don't like that kind of device. That normally kind of annoys me or takes me out of a film. But in this one, it really works. It's really interesting the way the director plays around with it. It sort of adds extra layers to certain characters and makes certain beats of the film hit a lot harder as well. There's a character who spends the whole movie, they're trying to climb up this hill basically to conquer it from the Japanese. And there's a character who, the thing that's getting him through this is memories of his wife. He keeps thinking about his wife. And then later on, there's a revelation about his wife, and it just hits really hard because of everything you've gone through with him. And that's the only way that could have been done normally would be a conversation of, oh, here's my wife, so and so, waiting back home, that kind of cheesy stereotype thing that's been done in so many war movies. The way they do it here really makes it have some impact. So that's really cool. The location, the scenery is amazing. Like all the cinematography of this film. Malick was known to be sort of drifting off sometimes in the middle of shooting a scene because something would catch his eye, because it's such a beautiful environment that they're in. It'd be something that catches his eye. It'd be like, just start filming some bird or something like that. And as a result, there's some absolutely amazing footage in the film. And they shot constantly while they were making it, and just sort of cobbled together a film at the end. It seems it's like lots of like random moments. I don't know if you guys have you guys seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a result, it's got this massive cast of stars who all wanted to work with Malick, and some of them even thought they were like main characters in the film that were then either cut out completely or cut down to nothing. So there was like Mickey Rourke and Gary Oldman, who spent whatever amount of time on the film that aren't even in the film, the finished film now. Adrian Brody thought he was the main character. He barely gets a line. The real main character is Jim Caviezel, who I think is an excellent actor, and I don't think he's ever really got his due. He's obviously not well liked in Hollywood these days after Sound of Freedom and all that business. But I think that, to me, that makes him an even better guy. I thought Sound of Freedom was a great movie. I think he's a great actor. I think he should have been Superman at some point. I always thought he would have made a great Superman.
Mm.
But as far as this movie goes, like, the cinematography is amazing, the action's amazing. It's a movie that you just kind of like immerse in. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've got to say about it.
Yeah. I think I saw it in the not long after it come out, I think. So my memory of it is a little bit vague, but I do remember it it seemed quite episodic as opposed to having that, like a straight through narrative all the way through. And I do remember Jim Caviezel he did make a strong impression in that film. Just that, didn't it start off he's deserted or just gone off for a wander somewhere? He's like living with some villagers somewhere, isn't he? And
that's it. Yeah.
Just chilling out there by himself, and then gets dragged back into it. I do remember it being a very thoughtful film in many ways, and all those parts about like say Mickey Rourke not in it, various actors, blink and you miss them kind of elements to it. it'd be interesting. I'd love to know a little bit more about the filming of it. Like you said, they were filming constantly and then kind of put it all together afterwards.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what was going on between the conversations between these actors, their agents, getting script pages and thinking like they're the main characters. Then all of a sudden, what's happened here? What's going on? What we filming? Yeah. It's had some great. I thought it had some really good scenes. I think there's a raid. I think it's near the beginning where they go through a village, fighting the Japanese army, and it's so kinetic. You're kind of following the soldiers behind as they're running through. Firing off pistols at the Japanese with swords coming at them, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I remember the action parts of it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to give it another watch, though. I think that's
certain images and moments like really stay with you from it. I think it's like, because I've actually only seen it twice.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's like a couple bits that have stuck in your mind, and that was 30 years ago now. That movie was out nearly. Yeah. So yeah, it's speaks to how good it is, really.
Yeah, I've watched a few Terrence Malick films, and this is the only one I've enjoyed. They're all beautifully shot, but all the rest of them I've watched are unbelievably boring, and this one is actually entertaining. And as you say, with this film, it's all really well done. You really are immersed with this. I wouldn't say it's the best World War II film, but it is arguably one of the best looking World War II films ever made, I think.
Is it how many World War II films were there that concentrate on the Pacific theatre?
Not many, is there?
I can't think of many.
I think
apart from that Lee Marvin film, Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune, was it about the
yes,
crashed pilots?
Yeah, that was by John Borman. I think he made that.
Yeah.
And the one or two, there's the one with John Wayne, where he's the pilot. I think it's the Flying Sea Bees, which is set in the Pacific. And then there's obviously Midway as right. And then of course there's Tora Tora Tora, which was a Pearl Harbor, which is the best Pearl Harbor film. We will draw a polite veil over the 2001 film. Oh yeah, no, not forgetting, of course. No, this isn't Pacific, but it is the war in the Far East, obviously the Bridge over the River Kwai. Yeah. And there's that film. It's got Michael Caine in, and it's set in, I think it's on New Britain, and you have the American officer come in, and they're fighting the Japanese, but the British camp there's a sort of killing ground between them and the Japanese have got snipers in the trees. And at the end, Caine and the American officer have to try and get between from the tree line back to the camp without being shot. They have to run in a zigzag manner. I'm not sure if you remember that. No. I think it's called something like The Last Hero or There's No More Heroes. I can't remember the exact name of the title. And then there is another one, a black and white one, I remember. This is, I think, set in Burma. And it's got Dave McCallum in. So this is before he did Man from U.N.C.L.E. And they're a British unit that's been cut off and known to fight the Japanese. And there have been, I think, most of the Pacific as well, to war against the Japanese films of World War II films have mostly been Americans, because the British fighting against them was not very well known, to the extent that the British Army in Burma was famously referred to as the 14th Army, was referred to as the Forgotten Army, because nobody seemed to know they were fighting. Oh yes, and I've forgotten, there is one very famous, or should I say infamous, Second World War film about the Japanese with Errol Flynn called Objective Burma. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that one. It came out in 1946, and it's a stereotype of an American World War II film where the Americans say win the war. And obviously it covers Burma, where that was very much a British theatre of conflict against the Japanese, and it portrays it as if the Americans won it. And that they didn't dare release that in 1946 in Britain. It wasn't released in Britain until 1952, and even then there were quite understandable protests from 14th Army veterans about that film. So that's one. It's an enjoyable film, but you can understand entirely why that people really didn't like it. Oh yes, and actually one more film, which was actually made which was sort of influenced by the reaction to Objective Burma, which was called Merrill's Marauders.
I've heard of that one. Yeah,
the last film that the actor Jeff Chandler ever made, and it's an American unit that is actually fighting in Burma. It's based on a true story, and it's about them going after various objectives. And it's a really good film. It's very much like similar to sort of Devil's Brigade in a way. I think Devil's Brigade came after it, so more than likely Devil's Brigade was sort of influenced by that. Again, that's another story about a real life unit. But at the beginning of Merrill's Marauders, there's a sort of a piece of sort of plot dumping, where they make it quite clear that it was the British fighting in Burma, not the Americans, and that was specifically done in reaction to Objective from Burma, because I think one of the producers on that film had been a producer on Objective Burma, and he didn't want to get in trouble with that again.
So I've been there before, you know.
Yeah. I'll just go through a couple of the other comments. So just a second. That will come up at some point. So I should say, if you're referring to the 1993 version, that's well worth a watch. If either of you ever seen that version, it's a German film, and it's very much done from the German point of view about fighting in Stalingrad, and it's really good. It doesn't pull any punches, and it doesn't also try to, as that program, not sure if you saw it, about 15 years ago, called Generation War, which was supposedly sort of the German Band of Brothers, where they attempted to sort of soft soap the idea that the people involved weren't Nazis, or weren't sort of supporting the Nazi regime whilst they were fighting on the Eastern Front. Whereas in Stalingrad, there's no attempt to do that. It's a reasonably honest portrayal of sort of Stalingrad, especially, and it has a very bleak ending, which very much fits with the reality of what's going on. There's also a Russian film that came out in 2013 called Stalingrad, which I've not seen, but I believe is meant to be all right. But that is more like sort of propaganda than a proper war film. So, though propaganda films can sometimes be very good war films, but that's another topic. So, hello, Stephen. Have you seen Thin Red Line?
I haven't, no. I always have to jot these down on the to watch list stuff.
Well, since you're here, Stephen, I'll ask you to start talking about your first pick. I won't be putting up the pictures because I'm having some technical difficulties at the moment.
Yeah, no worries. No, it's I mean, I've given up on my computer. I have to do this through my phone. So I think it must. Is it raining near yours? So I've got an awful storm where I am. I think that's yeah. So sorry. I have to remember which one I picked again. What did I pick? Oh, I picked it. Yes, King Rat, which is based on the book by James Clavell, which is based on his own experiences in a Japanese POW camp in the Far East. And it's I don't know if anyone's seen that.
Yeah.
You've seen it, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I enjoyed it. I should say I haven't seen it for about 15 years or so, but I did enjoy it. It's an interesting prisoner of war film because it's very much not in the sort of vein of, say, The Great Escape or the sort of or the Vault or the Wooden Horse film. So it did remind me more so of sort of Bridge over the River Kwai, not just because of the setting, but the sort of tone as well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it is similar. I think it's less. I sort of picked it because I think it's. I quite like films that go into sort of the minutiae of just sort of life in a situation, and this really gets into like what life in the camps was like in terms of the sort of complexities of the relationships within prisoners, between officers and enlisted men, and of course between them and the Japanese guards, and often quite very grey relationships, of course, because there's all sorts of without spoiling the plot too much, you know, the way it sort of centers around obviously the king rat, who is basically an American POW, who basically becomes a fixer within the camp for various, you know, obviously they're all under serious deprivation. But also it's quite interesting is the guards as well are not, you know, they're not exactly comfortable either. So he's got a real talent for getting things. But he has to sort of mediate between all the different factions. And then, of course, there's a relationship between him and Edward Fox's character, who's basically playing James Clavell. For those who don't know, sorry, James Clavell is also the author of Shogun. I don't know if people have seen that. It's also good. It's actually King Rat is part of his Asian saga. So that's Shogun, Taipan, Whirlwind, and I think another one which is escaping. But they're all sort of set at different points in the sort of British experience in the Far East, through the sort of from the 16th century onwards. And yes, so King Rat is sort of part of it, but it's very much based on his experiences. Yes, Edward Fox is sorry, not Edward Fox, James Fox, his brother, is it plays basically him. I mean, I think he survived in the end, but he was quite traumatized for a long time afterwards. I think he sort of always had to carry a tin of fish or some sort of food with him at all times, because he couldn't bear the thought of being as hungry as he was in the camp again. So yes, but anyway, but the film itself is I think it's just superbly acted and filmed, and it just has a fantastic realism to it. Of course, there's also a great villain who's actually not a Japanese guard. It's actually a British NCO played by Tom Courtenay, who I just found he's just awful in it as this sort of disciplinarian sort of busybody. But yeah, I really enjoyed it as a film, and I just found it very engrossing. It's not, and just really well acted and really sort of really interesting. Because I also it's not too I think it really gives a human sort of approach to all the characters, which I really enjoyed.
Was it a very commercial film, Stephen? Because it sounds very indie type.
It was. It's 1961. I think it did okay at the box office, but it's 1965. It was very well reviewed, but I think it was I think it was reasonably successful at the time. I don't know if it was a sort of blockbuster film, but I mean I only knew about it because I read the book and I wanted to see the sort of film adaptation. But it is very faithful to it. Yeah.
One thing I will say,
I've not seen that one, so that's the list.
Actually, one thing I should mention is James Cavell also wrote the screenplay for The Great Escape.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, which I think came out 2 years before King Rat. So that you sort of get, I see them as sort of white and black, sort of negative and positive of the sort of POW World War II POW camp films. That one is very much the Great Escape, the sort of say populist version of a POW war camp film, and then you've got something like King Rat, which is very much not that. With that, I think John, we'll move on to your first one.
Okay. So my first one is Where Eagles Dare. I thought someone's bound to pick this one as well. You know, it's an old classic. Has everybody seen that one?
Yeah.
Seen that one?
Haven't.
No, have you not? No.
No.
Right. This is typical kind of, this is standard Saturday afternoon watching. So yeah, it's so we've got Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood in the main roles, then supported by Mary Ure and Ingrid Pitt. And the story, sort of the broad brush story, is that it's a commando mission story. It's a men on a mission story where they have to go and rescue a captured American general who's been held by the Nazis in an alpine fortress castle. So before he's interrogated, and he can give away the plans to the Western Front, I think it is. So they have to rescue him before then. There's various twists and turns in it. To say any more really about the story is you're going to give some bits away, and it's best that you just enjoy it, because it's quite lots of reversals, lots of twists, lots of turns. So we've got it's partly an espionage film as well as being a kind of World War II film. Great performances, just, you know, good fun. It's one of those just good, solid adventure films. About 2 hours, I think it is, with, you know, gunfights, explosions, infiltration, all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, just a really good sort of fun sort of afternoon thriller film, based on a novel by Alistair MacLean, I think it was.
Yeah,
it's based on. I don't know how faithful it is to the novel. I've not read the novel at all. I don't even know if the novel was written at the same time as the film, or if it's one of those that was kind of adapted as he was writing the film even. But yeah, good fun film to watch.
It is, yeah. Actually, the way it was written was because Elliot Craster, the producer, liked Alistair MacLean by this point, by sort of the mid-60s, had written a number of very great sort of adventure World War II stories. The famous one being obviously Guns of Navarone. And Elliot Craster had gone to Alistair MacLean and said, "Can you come up with a number of book ideas, write these books, and then I'll adapt them." And out of this you get Where Eagles Dare, and also a lesser known Alistair MacLean film, which was sort of meant to be a realistic James Bond, and with the main character was played by Anthony Hopkins, and it was called Eight Bells Toll, which is a good entertaining film if you've ever seen it. And so MacLean wrote the novel. It then got adapted, and it came out, I think, just before the film did. And so it sort of the book was very much as much a sort of publicity for the film as it was being adapted from it, being adapted from the book. Sorry. And so as you say, it's a really great action film. Endless.
You can't really say too much about it, can you, without giving too much away? Just all is not what it seems when they go on this mission. That's all you can really say about it.
Lots of Germans with sort of stormtrooper aim ability, and endless magazines that never seem to be need to be reloaded.
yeah. Clint Eastwood doing his just kind of like, very, very laconic, kind of just steely-eyed sort of glares at everybody, and Yeah.
Oh,
Richard Burton, I think he was smashed during some of the filming. I think from what the story, as the stories go, he
yeah.
went disappearing at some point during filming to go on a drinking bender with Richard O'Toole, Peter O'Toole, I think, and Richard Harris. So great.
Yeah, interesting. The reason why Burton did the film was because he wanted to make a film that his children could actually see.
Okay, yeah.
And in terms of the film and the novel, the film is actually quite faithful to the novel in terms of plot. Some of the character names are changes, but the film is actually to a degree more violent than the book. There's a lot more death, but there is actually quite a bit of action in there, and all the major sort of action points, plot points that you get in the film are also there in the book. The bit about that, if you notice that in the film, Clint Eastwood doesn't speak much. That's because he somehow convinced the writers and the director to give Richard Burton most of his lines. And there was an incident on set where he was doing a scene where Clint Eastwood was using a pistol, and the producers who were all visiting there were watching this scene. And when Clint Eastwood shot the gun, he turned it on. He turned the pistol on using his finger, and then put it back in the holster. And then went, "Oh shit, I'm not on a western."
Old habits die hard. It's muscle memory. Man with no name.
And there are quite a few sort of entertaining lines in there. My favourite one has always been the one at the briefing where they ask why they're not going to use Lancaster bombers to sort of get to deal with the general. And Michael Horden, playing the admiral, says, "Well, I think if we did that, General Eisenhower would launch his second front against us." And one thing I should mention is the villain, the Gestapo officer played by Darren Nesbitt.
Yes, yeah.
He's a wonderful sort of scenery-chewing villain.
Yeah.
And in fact, on set, one of the scenes where he gets killed, when they did that originally, he's obviously got some bullets, blood packs on his chest. So when obviously, I can't remember which one kills him. When they kill him, they obviously explode. But when they did the scene, they put a bit too much explosives in the packs, and they almost blinded him. And just with Darren Nesbitt, he during the filming stayed at this very old hotel, and every morning he would have to get up at something like 4 a.m, and instead of sort of getting dressed in his uniform as a Gestapo officer this set where it was really cold, he'd get dressed up at the hotel and then go to the set. And obviously nobody else was staying in the hotel at the time, and so he'd be leaving there about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And one morning he goes out, and there's a old man there who's walking up the corridor, sees him, screams at the top of his voice, and collapses. And so they get him sorted out, and Darren Nesbitt subsequently discovers that the man in question was, one, the hotel owner, and two, had during the Second World War been the personal driver of Heinrich Himmler, and he thought as a Nesbitt clearly made him think that Himmler had come back. It really is a fun film if you've not seen it, and I think you can find it pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, I think so. And it looks great as well. It's got fantastic photography on it, and the scenery and the sets, are amazing. Just to look at it, that cold alpine look to it. And good cable car fight towards the end. They're fighting on top of a cable car as well. Good battle on that part.
Yeah, and John Best also makes a really good point. The intro music, that's the music throughout the story is really well done, and that music is the intro music is really good. It's one, to me, it's up there with one of the great sort of World War II film themes. The one criticism I've always had of the opening of Where Eagles Dare, it's the fact that the title is, when it's on screen, in red. And for some reason, when I see that, I can't read it.
I do like the Misfits song that was inspired by it.
I think did Iron Maiden do a song as well, Where Eagles Dare? Because I'm pretty sure that Bruce Dickinson was into all that
I
kind of
think they
history.
did as
I'm
well.
sure he's done
Yeah.
something along those. I'll have to look for the Misfits one.
Yeah.
How inspired was it? As in,
uses like the title and a couple of little references, but it's the Danzig era Misfits is the 80s more punky version. And they didn't always use movie titles or anything like that then. So yeah, it's a good track. Recommend it. That's my contribution.
I'll have a look for that on the YouTube or Spotify then. Right.
Yeah.
Stephen, have you seen Where Eagles Dare?
I haven't actually. That is already on the bucket list. But no, I'll have to give that a watch at some point.
Yeah. I've got to say, if you wait a few months, you'll probably have to watch it on BBC or ITV at Christmas, because it's always on.
It comes around a couple of times a year, doesn't it? It's all, you know.
And at Christmas,
excellent.
And at Christmas, it's usually always on with The Great Escape and then Zulu.
Yeah.
I'll just go through a couple of comments. So Davey says, "Yeah, it really is," and then, well, you're lucky, John. That will be making an appearance reasonably shortly. Yes, that is another great film. Yeah, that one's again based on a true story about a silly operation to destroy the German heavy water plant at Telemark in Norway, and really good. There's a TV series about it made by the Norwegians, where they cover sort of the whole long sort of operation, both the pre resistance elements going after the heavy water and then the operation itself. I can't remember what that was called, but I think it was made about 10 years ago, and I remember it was on Channel 4 in Britain at the time, and reasonably good. And of course, there's a documentary made by Ray Mears from when I was a kid. I think that must have been 2003, where he reenacts the sort of trek they did, the SOE team did, when they had to go after the heavy water plant. So, at this point, I'll bring up my first one, which is Dunkirk from 1958, and this tells the story through three fictional points of view of the retreat from Dunkirk. I'll just wait a second. Sorry about that. And so the story follows a journalist played by Bernard Lee. He's almost certainly more famous playing M in the Sean Connery, for playing M in the Bond films. And he's a journalist who's sort of trying to get his neighbours and friends to sort of come to terms with the fact that the war is actually a war, because all his friends around him are people who believe in the idea of the Holy War, that the war's really not going to affect them. They think it's going to be something like World War One, whereas in reality, the journalist played by Bernard Lee very much knows it's going to be something a lot more brutal and a lot more. The Germans are going to say bomb Britain, and so he's sort of trying to make this clear to his neighbours. And one of his neighbours, played by Richard Attenborough, is a garage owner, and he's very much a representative of sort of the complacency in Britain at the time amongst the civilian population. The idea, it's not going to affect me. The war's going to take place over there. And then the third character is a corporal in the British Army and the British Expeditionary Force in France, played by John Mills. And the story very much follows him as his lieutenant gets killed and he has to get his men to Dunkirk. And then when things sort of really kick off with Dunkirk, Bernard Lee and Richard Attenborough's character join forces to start transporting troops using a boat from England, from obviously Dunkirk to England, and to my mind, I prefer it to the 2017 Dunkirk film, partly because it's reasonably there's an actual story there to my mind, and you're following characters so coherently, and also there are bits where scenes cut to say the commander in chief of the British Expeditionary Force, Lord Gort, as he makes his decisions of getting the British troops out, and so you get a good sense of the of what happened to Dunkirk coherently, which to my mind you don't necessarily get that with the Nolan film. It's also interesting to look at Dunkirk as a piece of propaganda because it very much is playing into the sort of mythology of Dunkirk with the idea of the little boat saving the soldiers, whereas what actually happened with the little boats was the Royal Navy took over from them and from the owners who would have brought them out to sea, and then they started bringing the men back to the ships. And so it's interesting to look at that. And I believe one of the film is based on 2 books, and one of them was written by Trevor Ellis, who wrote the Quiller Memorandum, the film, the book based on that. So interesting connection there. So overall, it's a really nice film, and as I say, I personally prefer it to the 2017 Christopher Nolan film. So, have any of you seen that? It's in the 58 version.
I haven't seen either of them, either of the versions there. The way you describe it, it rings a bell. So I don't know if I might have seen some of it at some point, you know, again, with these kind of like, you know, I used to watch a lot of these, saying to Steve earlier, a lot of these books of films that I watched with like my granddad on a Saturday afternoon and things like that, you know, when they're on TV. So it's probably one of those that I may well have seen at some point, definitely. But yeah, I'll have to add that on the list, have another look at.
It's very much.
You say it's better than the Nolan version because it seems quite similar with the 3 different stories. Doesn't Nolan do that as well?
It is, but the in the 58 Dunkirk, it's far more linear,
right?
And I found sort of disjointed nature of the Nolan film difficult to. I like bits about that film, but the 58 version is just far more linear, and it tells the story, to my mind, more coherently than the 2017 Nolan version.
He can't help but piss around with the time frame, can he? He just can't help himself.
How badly does he do it in Dunkirk, Steve? Is it straight like properly?
It's a little bit jarring. You don't notice that he's doing it at first, and there's a specific scene that hits because you see a character that has already been in the narrative for a while, and you realise that you're seeing them at an earlier point of the story. And you see how a certain event has affected them, and you realise that event hasn't happened yet.
Right. Yeah.
And otherwise, I didn't notice until that point. I might have been a bit slow on the uptake with it, but yeah, I didn't realise it was playing around like that until then. So and then it does do it a couple of times, and there's a couple of moments where to me it added a little bit of something, but he could have just as easily told it linear. He didn't need to do that with that movie, I don't think.
He hides behind that a little bit, the gimmick.
I just think it's part of his storytelling DNA. I don't think he can tell a story any other way. I think he likes to thread things in at certain points. Because I don't think he's done a movie where he hasn't done that, has he? That I haven't seen Interstellar, but or the one that everyone slags off. I've not seen that either. But I've seen pretty much everything else he's done, and it's ever since Memento, he's pretty much always played around with time a little bit. Insomnia was fairly linear.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can vaguely remember that one. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he plays about with it in Interstellar, certainly.
Yeah,
with
that. So I think that's just his thing.
Just his thing.
Yeah. sometimes it makes a film better, and sometimes it's just a little bit jarring, like Aaron said. So yeah.
Stephen, have you seen the 1958 Dunkirk?
I'm afraid not. I mean, like the others, I've seen the recent one, but I actually didn't know there was a 1958 one.
Yeah, I think it's been forgotten in more recent years. Partly, I think, because of the Nolan film, because that was such a big success that people just don't think Dunkirk has been done before on the big screen. And to what you were saying, John, about it being a Sunday, Sunday afternoon film, it was. That's actually, in fact, the first time I saw it was on when I was about 10 years old on BBC Two on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
So it's not repeated very often on TV for some reason, even though it was regarded by its producer, Michael Balkan, as the best thing he ever did. And he was asked when they were selling Elstree Studio in the late 50s to the BBC, and he was asked what was the best thing he did, and he said Dunkirk. He said we got everything right with it. It was pretty much the most perfect film we made.
Yeah, I'll definitely add that one to the list and have a look for that then. Keep an eye out for that.
I think it might be on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah.
Since we've brought it up, Steve, do you want to talk about the 2000?
Yeah, we'll go with that. So that was my pick. Obviously, similar story to Aaron's. Tells it slightly differently. This is more focused on the story from the point of view of the guys on the land on the beach, guys coming over on the boats, and the pilots in the air. So it's visually, it's amazing, as you can imagine. With Nolan, it's pretty spectacular, that one. I do enjoy all the three individual stories. It does follow. You were saying that was kind of a myth about the civilians taking their boats out, and that not that many of them did, and that the Navy took over. In the Nolan film, you see before the main boat that you're following of the civilian and the two lads that are going out to rescue, you do see that the Navy have got hold of all the other boats, and they're kind of going off. The Navy are almost I think they're telling them to come back. They want to take the boat themselves, but they want to go off and do it. But that character was based on a real guy, a real civilian who was involved. He was based on was it first officer of the Titanic, survivor of the Titanic, and he had taken his boat out and gone and rescued people. So that's who that character was meant to represent. So yeah, he's not as cheeky, obviously, as you say, with the story there. Great performances, great actors. It's you've got Cillian Murphy in there, you've got Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hardy. I wasn't upset about Harry Styles being in it. It didn't offend me. I didn't even know who he was, to be honest, until someone told me. I knew the name, but he wasn't bad in it. Yeah, everyone was pretty decent, and yeah, the storyline all around, it's great how it cuts between the three different stories as they're progressing. It kind of reminded me of what George Lucas used to do in the Star Wars films, where he would cut between the three battle sequences at the end. In the Star Wars films, where you'd have something that you'd have a lightsaber battle going on here, and you'd have TIE fighters over there, and then you'd have something else going on, and it was like that kind of a way that the story was told, where it was constantly jumping between the three, and so it never lags. So yeah, I think it's a really cool movie. It's also very lean for a war movie. It's less than 2 hours long, and it doesn't really feel like it stops. Like the momentum is there throughout. You kind of like, you get to the end of it, you're like, or I was anyway. I was feeling like, it's a very intense film. So yeah, that's why that made my pick anyway.
Yeah, I will say that whilst I had my problems with it, saw that sort of jarring element between different sort of viewpoints, there are really good sort of set pieces in there, especially the bit where the German planes are attacking the boats, and they have to get the ship away from cut the ship off, so it doesn't sink next to the the mole.
Yeah.
And also the bit where the German fighter has got the small boat, and they're able to sort of, I won't mention what they do, but they're able to stop it, shall we say, quite effectively. And there is one element to that film that plays into the Dunkirk myth. Well, it plays into sort of the myth about the RAF that when the RAF kill, when the pilot played by Tom Hardy deals with the German fighter, the troops on the ground are cheering. The men of the British Expeditionary Force at the time of Dunkirk and afterwards were really not very much big fans of the RAF, given what they've been doing, given that they didn't regard their support in France be particularly good, to the extent that after Dunkirk, all members of the RAF, if they were in a pub with British soldiers, would get beaten up. They were not popular at all with veterans of the Battle of France and Dunkirk, and so that sort of portrayal and so the sort of cheering is a bit of a myth.
They did kind of they do touch on that, because when one of the lads gets off at the end, one of the pilots, and one of the soldiers sort of bumps past him, and he's like, "Where the hell were you lot?" kind of thing. And
yeah.
So they do kind of speak to that sentiment. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, especially along the south coast, where obviously they'd all arrived. They were waiting in various camps, and there was a degree to which the RAF pilots would sort of avoid going to those pubs at all, because they knew that they wouldn't get the best of receptions.
Yeah. One other thing about that movie, it felt like it was only Tom Hardy and his mate that went out there to fight in the planes. There weren't any other planes. I don't know if that was a deliberate choice, or if that was somewhat historically accurate, that there weren't many that went over, or that there were a few, but they were quite spaced out. Do you know about that?
I think that might be just a bit of a dramatic license. The RAF were operating there.
Yeah.
They were obviously operating from southeast England. They had been pulled out of France, I think sometime before Dunkirk, and so they weren't as sort of prevalent dealing with the Luftwaffe as they could have been. But that was as much as the fact they were doing the sort of transition from France to the south of England, and so, but it was nowhere near as sort of lacking as it's portrayed in the film.
Yeah, it just seemed like they were the only two, so they just kept going. Although his character was based on a real guy, and I did think it was very cool as well when I looked at they used real Spitfires for a lot of it, and the moment where they landed it on the beach was real as well. They actually did that.
Stephen, what did you think of the Nolan Dunkirk?
I really liked it. I thought, I thought it was. I mean, I know there were sort of issues with, the sort of with the dials of the Spitfire and whatever. But I mean, I thought it captured what it would have been like really well, and I was hooked all through for the whole 2 hours of it. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed
it. If you've got nothing else to say, Steve, we'll move on to John's next choice.
Okay. So my next choice is Cockleshell Heroes. So this one's about a group of Royal Marine Commandos who are tasked with basically a special. It's one of the earliest special forces missions. It's based on a true story of Operation Frankston, I believe it was called, which was for the commandos to go up, paddle up an estuary in France, and attach limpet mines to German cargo ships because they were supplying obviously the war effort. So that's the basic mission that they have to go on, and it's very much a men on the mission type film. So you get to see the recruitment, the training, and then the mission itself of these guys doing this. It's I mention it, and a lot of people haven't heard of it or haven't seen it. You know, I think it is one of those films that's kind of passed people by a little bit. It's who's in it? So you got Jose Ferre in it playing the lead officer. Now, obviously, you've got an American actor playing who was an English commanding officer. I can't honestly remember how they explained that one away in the film. I think it was just kind of it's very much a fictionalized version of the real mission. So I think it's faithful in as much as it's true in spirit, and a lot of the things that happen in the film did happen, or the chronology might be slightly different. So I'm not too sure how they got away with the sort of American officer who, and I think he's called Stringer, I believe, in the film. So Stringer's this quite lax kind of officer. He's backed up by Trevor Howard, who's played a more kind of traditional captain, First World War veteran, been passed over for promotion a little, you know, in the past. Very much a by the rules, by the numbers kind of stiff upper lip English officer who is almost set up as he's going to be the antagonist, you know, the one that's going to cause all the problems in it. Obviously, they clash in the training of the men, and in the end, Trevor Howard's character has to get a grip of it all and actually comes good and starts to shape these men into an actual fighting force. Got some great scenes in terms of like training montages, and there's a really good bit where to test their sort of ingenuity and resolve, and if they're right for this mission of going behind enemy lines. They all get dressed up in German paratrooper uniforms, parachute into the English countryside, and have to kind of make their way back to the camp without getting detained or captured at all. So that's a kind of bit of a kind of low key sort of comedic moment where one of them decides to strip off all his uniform and basically run the whole way back to camp as if he's on a train, you know, like on a marathon or something, nicking bottles of milk from milkmen and so on. Other people jump in I think they were jumping in the backs of trains, getting taxis. It's got those characters in it from the very, very identifiable English war film characters as well. Very kind of stereotypical. Like I say, they've got the guy who's running is your kind of big strong man type character. Ruddock, I think his name is in it. There's your cheeky Irishman in there. Your chirpy Cockney, all the rest of it. So it's again a good enjoyable film. Some good action sequences in it, and I think it's made all the more sort of poignant by the fact that it was a true story, and without giving too many spoilers away, you know, not everybody survived, and there was a certain outcome that some of the men faced. That will just make you kind of, you know, it's the best embodiment of kind of English grit and stiff upper lip. Bit Trevor Howard's last line, let's put it that way, right at the very end. Yeah. Do you know what I'm on about, Aaron? Will that be?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, very good film. Definitely worth a watch. Again, another Saturday afternoon one. It will pop up on BBC Two at some point, I'm sure. So, yeah, definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, this is another one of those, as John says, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon films. And I saw it during the summer holidays when I was a kid I think it would have been on BBC Two.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there's some other scenes in there, like the fact that the one where the runner Ruddock his wife, when he goes to see his wife. Yes. Who was played? I think the actor was David Lodge. Might have been. He played.
Right. The Lodger or Ruddock?
Ruddock.
Oh, Ruddock, right? Yeah. There's.
Yeah,
that's a very good scene. He's to sort of fill people in on it. So Ruddock's married. He decides to sort of go AWOL at one point because his wife's having an affair with some sort of like, I don't know, type spiv type lodger or something. So he's going to go around and sort him out. Obviously, he's gone AWOL, and Trevor Howard's character, the kind of, you know, the by the books guy, decides to go, I'll go after him. I'll go and sort it out. So you obviously think he's going to take him in, you know, chuck him in the jail or whatever. Anyway, he meets up with Ruddock, says that he understands exactly what he's there to do. Goes, so, how long do you need, Ruddock? And he's goes, well, you know, 3 minutes, sir. Don't be daft. That's nowhere nearly long enough. I'll give you 15. Just make sure you do a good job. Drives him around to the home. He goes in, and Trevor Howard's kind of waiting outside, and you just from the inside you hear this like smack, crash, as this fight's going on, and a policeman comes up, says, what's happening here? And Trevor Howard says, one of my men has just gone in there. He's having a problem with the lodger. Oh, smack, bang, wallop, crash. Oh, acting under orders, is he? Says the copper. And he says, well, yes. So he couldn't refuse then, could he? No. Oh, I best get on then. Have a nice night, and just wanders off and then this guy comes flying through the window that he sorted out. Yeah, it's got some good moments on that. It's got a nice bar brawl scene as well, isn't it? When they fight the Royal Navy soldiers. So it's got all the elements, if you like, of a classic men on a mission type film. Yeah, definitely worth a watch.
Nice.
Yeah. And the Irishman in there is actually is before the Second World War, a member of the IRA. Because I think it's after the bar brawl, he toasts the IRA.
He does, yes, he does. Oh yeah. Can't imagine they get away with that nowadays. So because he's almost like a stereotypical kind of like Irishman character. A shock of red hair. Carrot red hair, ex-IRA. Probably called Paddy, something like that.
Have you seen Cockershell Heroes, Stephen?
I'm afraid not. No.
You're going to build a ballistic.
I'm not going to be able to leave the TV room. I've got so many films to catch up.
Have you seen it, Steve?
I haven't seen it. No. It sounds good though. I like it.
Yeah. I think it's also on YouTube as well somewhere.
I
find a lot of the I think a lot of the older films that will get mentioned on here, you'll almost certainly be able to find a pirated copy on YouTube.
It's got Christopher Lee in it as well. Christopher Lee's in it as well, isn't he? As the submarine captain. Makes a reason. I don't think he's in it for very long, because they get delivered by submarine into to paddle the rest of the way in. And I think it was maybe one of his earlier roles, perhaps. I'm not too sure. I can't remember exactly when it was made. But funnily enough, you've got Christopher Lee in there, and you've got one of the Marines is played by the actor who played Jonathan Harker in Christopher Lee's Dracula as well. So another little kind of tie-in bit there.
Yeah.
Actually, with Christopher Lee, I think one of his first films he ever made, where he has an appearance, is Battle of the River Plate, where he plays a South American, very swarthy bar owner, where his bar is on the coast, so all the journalists and the spies are in the bar.
He was on the other side of things, though, wasn't he, in the Second World War, Christopher Lee?
Yeah. He was in RAF intelligence and then ended up in SOE.
Yeah. So there's that story, isn't there, about when he was filming Lord of the Rings, and Peter Jackson's gave him some acting advice on how someone should act when he takes a knife in the back. And Christopher Lee was like, no, not like that. This is how they sound. I speak from personal experience.
With Christopher Lee, he had a sort of his sort of background is fascinating. He obviously is cousins with Ian Fleming, and when he was at Eton, I can't remember. I think it was one of the senior teachers there was M.R. James, the ghost story writer, and Christopher Lee in 1939 witnessed the last public execution using the guillotine in France. And of course, Christopher Lee was, through his mother, who was an Italian aristocrat, a descendant of Charlemagne.
That's some background.
Yeah.
Didn't he compose a death metal album?
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, if you've got anything else to add, John, I'm going to ask Stephen to choose his pick next.
Yes. So we've actually, I think, mentioned it already, which is my second pick was the Guns of Navarone, which is, I mean, I think is a pretty. Sorry, I think it needs no introduction really. It's one of the sort of classic sort of World War II films, which I must have seen about 5 or 6 times now. It's obviously it's based on the book by Alexander MacLean. It's based on the premise is there's 2,000 British soldiers trapped on an island, on a Greek island, and they're trying to get them out by sea, but they can't because the Germans have erected these 2 huge guns protected underneath a cliff, and they can't they tried to dislodge them using the RAF, and that's been a fiasco. So they send in Gregory Peck and a few others to scale the cliffs and blow them up from the inside. And yeah, without giving away the plot, it's good. It's great. It's got all the sort of classic sort of war film tropes. Going undercover. Ranger characters. Gregory Peck scowling everywhere, and shootouts and explosions, and it's a cracking watch. And as we've said, it's sort of like a lot of these great sort of rainy Saturday film.
Yeah, it's a really great film, and of course, Stephen mentioned that they tried to get the guns with the RAF, and of course, the commander of the squadron that does that, and at the end, sort of explains why they can't at the beginning of the film why they can't get at the guns. He's an Australian being played by Richard Harris.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, it has a sort of lambasting. Oh God, what's his face? I was going to call him Mr. Sweet from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but I'm trying to remember what his actual name is.
James Justice Robertson.
Yes, that's the one. As the sort of intelligence chief, who sort of cooked up the disaster, and I think it's something like 18 men dead or something. Yeah. No, it's a fantastic cast. What's it? Yeah, obviously I've mentioned Gregory Peck. There's Anthony Quinn, Anthony Quayle. There's a lot of the sort of fixtures of sort of early '60s British and American films of the time. In fact, I'm not sure there isn't a sort of film in the '50s that doesn't have Anthony Quinn in it. But they're all at the top of their game.
Yeah, and of course you got Stanley Baker in it playing the Butcher of Barcelona, who's a veteran of the Spanish Civil War, who's, so I say, not in his top form. And interestingly, David Niven sort of playing against type in a way as an NCO who is not overly interested in. He's somewhat something of a barrack room lawyer.
He's not sort of the usual sort of suave, collected type that he usually played. Although he's still quite sort of witty and sort of and charismatic. But yeah, it's definitely a break from his usual roles.
Yeah. I take it, both of you seen the film?
Yeah. Yeah, I can only really echo everything you've said there. It's just another great Saturday afternoon type film. Plenty of action, good performances. It's been a while since I've seen it. Did they do a couple of sequels? Force 10 to Navarone, or
yeah, there was in terms of the film, there was Force 10 to Navarone, and then there were a couple of book sequels to the book, which were written in the 90s, which I've read one of them, and they seemed all right, but it was nowhere near as good as the original.
Right. Yeah. Did the sequels have Robert Shaw and Harrison Ford in? Am I getting completely mixed up?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I think Robert Shaw's playing Gregory Peck's character, and Edward Fox plays David Niven's character in False Tent and Averone.
Right.
So, which is an enjoyable film to watch.
Yeah.
And I'll just go through a couple of the comments. So, oh, hello, Britain. Britain's another booktuber.
Hello, Britain.
Hi, Britain.
As an honourable mention, definitely.
Pause it all there, Aaron. That just that's.
Well, if nobody else has got anything else to say, I'll move on to my pick, which is a film actually made during the Second World War called The Way Ahead from 1944. It's by Carol Reed as the director, and it stars David Niven, William Hartnell. He's got Stanley Holloway in. Peter Ustinov in a very small role. And it's very much a sort of story following sort of ordinary soldiers during the Second World War. So it starts just after Dunkirk, where David Niven plays, I think his name is Jimmy Pearson, and he has been in the Territorial Army before the Second World War. He's at Dunkirk, and then he comes back, and he then is given command of a platoon of raw recruits, which William Hartnell is the NCO overseeing their training, and so you follow them through their training, their first, and then their transport to North Africa, and then them seeing initial action in North Africa, and it's as I say, it very much follows their sort of story, and you see them going from civilian life into army life, getting used to it, and then becoming a proper sort of cohesive military unit. And it's good. It's really well done, because William Hartnell's character in it is very much, before he played Doctor Who, he had this role. He was very much typecast as playing traditionalist Ramrod straight backed NCOs. He would go on to play this in the Army Game, which was the big program he was well known for before he did Doctor Who, and in this he plays that. However, that's sort of undercut, because during the course of the film, the men think he's being a bully to them, and he's mistreating them, and the men even go to complain to David Niven's character. However, there's a scene in the film where Hartnell is talking to David Niven's character, and David Niven asks him what he thinks of the men, and he says they're really good. They're going to make a really good unit, and they're essentially men who are perfect material to be soldiers, and when they've gone through training, you'll be able to rely on them. And so it becomes clear to the audience, and this is overheard by one of the men. So it becomes clear that he's not bullying them. He's actually this has got an aim, and it's got a good aim, and you sort of see their sort of way they're acting in basic training changes after that. And then there's a scene where they go to North Africa on the transport from North Africa. The boat gets sunk, and so you see them having to deal with that. As for example, having to deal with getting the Bren. They see having to get a Bren gun carrier out, because it's threatening to drown some men. And then when they get to North Africa, you see them fighting the Germans, but you don't ever see the Germans. It's the Germans are off in the distance, and there's a sandstorm, and then the film ends with them marching towards the enemy. And I enjoy this film for a couple of reasons. One, it's that sort of ground view of the Second World War that you don't necessarily see in World War II films. Quite a lot of World War II films are sort of very pulpy, and they portray, which I do enjoy, and they portray sort of super soldiers, or they show special operations, whereas you don't necessarily see sort of a day-to-day sort of view of how war's fought, and how the Second World War's fought, and so you see that. And also, this film influenced Dad's Army, because at the end of the film, when the soldiers are marching into towards the Germans, the actors' names start appearing underneath their faces as a character pans to them, and that was directly taken by Jimmy Perry and David Croft for the end credits of Dad's Army, where you've got the platoon marching through and each actor gets his name. And interestingly, one of the actors in the platoon who plays a character in the platoon is played by John Laurie, who obviously is very well known for in Dad's Army for playing Private Fraser. And so it's a really, I like it for those two reasons, that it's an unusual film, especially given that it's made during World War II as well. And though it is to a degree propaganda, it's very subtly done, and in some ways it overcomes that. You could take the small elements of propaganda out of it and it'd still be a perfectly good film. And also because of obviously the influence on Dad's Army. I should say it is again one of these films that is put on British TV on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon. So, has anybody seen it?
I haven't, no. Not seen that one.
I'm afraid not.
Yeah. What are the more propagandist elements to it, Aaron, that you think?
Oh, it's very much a part of sort of pulling together sort of there's elements to that so the particular sort of stuff where Niven criticises the men criticising Hartnell's character, and though even that is not so, even that can be taken as not necessarily particularly propagandistic, given that sort of it fits with the way that Hartnell's character is acting, and the fact that would be sort of reasonable for an NCO of the British Army at the time to act. And so, as I say, the propaganda elements are very light touch, and so it really does. It's a really good film, and it. Oh, when I mentioned Peter Ustinov in it. Peter Ustinov plays when they're in North Africa. The town they're stationed in has a bar, and he runs the bar. And there's a very funny scene where a couple of Bedouins come in the bar, and the British soldiers are playing darts with a dartboard, and one of the Bedouins decides to join in with a spear, and he hits a ball with his spear on the dartboard. Unfortunately, he splits the dartboard in two. I'm just going to bring up this comment because I think it's interesting. What is it about World War II that inspired so many great films and books? I think because it was such a universal experience for the generation that fought it, that everybody, especially if you're in somewhere like Britain, where the war was over your head from pretty much September 1939 up until very early on in 1945, that even after the Luftwaffe had lost its dominance, you still had the V1 and V2 rockets being launched at Britain. And obviously, if you were a man over the age of 18 from 1939 onwards, you were in the armed forces in some way. And so I think that's why there's so much there. And it's an experience that sort of creates the world after it. The the Cold War is a direct consequence of the alliance between the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union, and the carve-off and sort of the Iron Curtain is a product of Potsdam in 1945, and obviously the sort of the Vietnam War comes about because of the Viet Minh fighting the Japanese when the Japanese occupy it at French acceptance in 1940, and the Americans support the Viet Minh during the Second World War, and then that leads to the French fighting the Viet Minh, who are better known as Viet Cong, and that ends up with the Vietnam War. So there's all sorts of stuff going on, and of course the one thing that comes out of the Second World War that we still got today is nuclear weapons. That's the big thing. So I think it's because it's sort of one of those points of history where sort of history turns in the same way that let's say the Napoleonic Wars were, and you get and because of that, you get so much material, and also it's reasonably close. I mean, my paternal grandmother, who I lived with for most of my childhood, was born in 1933. As a child, she lived just down the road in Stourbridge, and when the German bombers were going to attack Birmingham, she and her family could stand on the hill and watch the German bombers fly overhead, see the lights of them, and sort of see the explosion very distantly when they were attacking Birmingham. So it's something that's still within living memory of people still alive today, and so and it's also, as I say, the most important event of the 20th century that sort of creates everything that comes after it, and so that I think that's why it inspires so much. I'm not sure what you think.
I think I think you touched on that point about it being a universal experience. I think the fact that anybody over a certain age would have been in the armed forces, and anybody still at home would have been serving the war effort in the factories or out in the fields, and doing that stuff there. Like you said about the living memory, my gran could remember that time a granddad served. All my uncles around that generation, they all served as well. So those kind of stories filter down to a degree, even though they didn't really talk that much about what they got up to. I don't remember anybody really talking much at all about it, apart from the odd little snippet of I was here, insert location. But that was about it, really. Nobody really went into detail about what they got up to or anything, or their experiences. But I think it then just kind of fed into perhaps entertainment, certainly through when I was growing up, through the films, through the comic books, comic books like Commando and things like that. Those kind of stories where they were always telling the sort of daring do World War II type stories. So yeah, I think that's where it's come from there.
And what about it? It's not mentioned here, but especially in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of World War II TV shows. So you had in America Combat. There was a program here in Britain. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a sort of anthology series which showed a particular intelligence operation during the Second World War. And obviously you had things like Dad's Army and
one called Secret Army, was there, Aaron? Was there one called Secret Army that yesterday? I think I can vaguely remember that.
Yeah, that was about getting the prisoners of war out of Belgium, the Belgian resistance.
Right. Yeah.
And of course that influenced comedically Hello, Hello.
Right. I remember Tenko as well. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
I can remember like my nan watching that when that was on.
About the POWs or something.
Yes, yeah.
I remember that being on, but I can't remember much about it. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, and of course, controversial nowadays for Michael Bates, but still a great program. It Ain't Half Hot Mum. Yeah. With
Jon Davies.
Yeah. In fact, there's on YouTube from I think 1988, 1989. There's an RAF information film where Windsor Davies is presenting it as if he is the sergeant major from Ain't His Half Up Mum, and of course, being a soldier, he's making fun of the RAF threat to it. Yeah. Well, with that, we'll move on to Steve. What's your last pick?
My last pick is going to please Sean Juice. You mentioned it earlier. It's Inglourious Bastards. It's kind of a parody. I think you say like about propaganda films and stuff like that. I think it plays with a lot of those stereotype characters. For anyone who's not seen it, the characters of the title are a special unit that are going around Germany and France and sort of disrupting everything that the Nazis are doing, trying to strike fear into them. Meanwhile, there's another storyline that's running where there is a character who is a Jew in hiding in France, and she's running a cinema, and she's right in the middle of all the Nazis, and you don't know if they're going to sort of discover her or not, because they're suddenly very interested in her cinema. There is a German soldier, decorated soldier, come actor who wants to have his movie premiere in her cinema, and it creates a lot of tension around her, where you're thinking, is she going to be discovered or not? I enjoy what it does with the stereotypical British characters as well. Michael Myers is funny in his little brief appearance and stuff like that. There's a lot of funny moments in it, but it still manages to also create a lot of tension when it wants to, in the way that Tarantino often can, with just a couple of people in a room talking to each other. And there's one scene in particular, is the best scene in the movie, and one of the best scenes he ever did, I think, is where they're having the drinking game in the cellar bar, and the sort of the undercover agents are meeting, and the Nazis decided to join their group and start asking questions about them and join in a game with them. And that's an excellent scene. Yeah, I like that one a lot. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but that was a stroke of genius. I think that's an amazing moment. And it also leads to what you were talking about earlier, a classic stiff upper lip type response to a situation from a certain character as well. It's an excellent sign off. And I think Fassbender should have been a Bond at some point.
Yeah.
I think it when you watch that movie in particular, like, why wasn't he James Bond? Like, he would have been perfect. It's a very funny film, weirdly as well. There's a lot of humor in it. Brad Pitt's character is hilarious as the kind of square-jawed all-American guy with his like southern accent when he's trying to speak Italian and trying to pass himself. Arrivederci, all that. It's very funny. But it's also like really tense. It's just a movie you can enjoy in two ways, really. The soundtrack's good. A lot of the old is it Morricone stuff that Tarantino pinched from the westerns. Really enjoy that. It gives it kind of more of an epic feel than it actually has, because there's not any big scenes. There's nothing big really going on. It's all very, very close and very intimate, a lot of the movie. But that just adds something to it. And that's the first time he started pinching soundtracks from other films. He used Morricone again in Hateful Eight. He used leftover stuff from The Thing soundtrack in that one as well. But great film all around. What do you guys think of it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm a bit like you. It's like a film of two parts, isn't it? You can enjoy one side of it and the other equally. But, you know, I'd love to have seen a bit more of just following the special unit, you know, Brad Pitt and his characters around. I want to see more of Hugo Stiglitz as well. Especially the way they introduced him at the beginning. Yeah, with this all of a sudden you've got this narration coming over it, and this kind of like big stamp of his name as if he's this superhero. It's quite amusing.
He could have done with a spin-off or something, couldn't he?
Yeah, just see what he was getting up to.
You touched on one of the things that's funny about it, is that the bastards aren't actually the main storyline.
No,
they're just kind of like, they're a subplot that's running throughout the film. Yeah. And actually, if they hadn't got involved at all, we would have had the same result.
Yeah,
I noticed when I was watching it, they actually contributed nothing to the story apart from being entertaining.
Yeah, I like that bit when you mentioned about the accents. I think when I think Brad Pitt, Eli Roth, and then I don't know the other actor's name, is playing like the cameraman, the assistant, and the accents get progressively worse. Yeah. As Brad Pitt starts off, you know, and then the next one, that's like terrible, and the next one's awful accent.
Yeah, I enjoyed the film. You mentioned the fact that it's sort of cartoonish. It does remind me a lot of those 1960s and 70s sort of Euro war films, World War II films, the ones that the sort of Italian ones, where they then dub it afterwards, and you'd have sort of famous actors like Klaus Kinski in the film for a few days, until he drank himself into oblivion, or his pay ran out and things like that.
Or he just flipped out knowing kids.
It did seem very much based on those, and interestingly, one of the films that seems to have influenced it, especially the soundtrack, is not a World War II film, but a favourite film of mine called Dark of the Sun by Jack Cardiff from 1968, which is about mercenaries in the Congo.
Is that Wilbur Smith adaptation?
Yes, it is. And interestingly, the reason why in the film Winston Churchill is played by Rod Taylor is because Rod Taylor played the main character in Dark of the Sun. And the main soundtrack of the film is the soundtrack from the Dark of the Sun. And it's by Jack something or other, a French composer. It's very much Tarantino making a World War II film inspired by World War II films.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, that, like you say, that the beer cellar scene is, that's from start to finish, amazing scene, isn't it? Everything about that scene's fantastic. You watch that. Very, very good. Very good. Great performances all round, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned it yet, but Christopher Waltz's character.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
He was kind of discovered by Tarantino for that, wasn't he? Not that certainly for American and like UK audiences. I don't think we knew about him before that.
Interestingly, though, he has actually appeared in another World War II film, which is the fictional biopic of Ian Fleming called Goldeneye.
Oh.
And he also appeared in another biopic of Ian Fleming called I've forgotten the name of it now, but he's had Sean Connery's son playing Ian Fleming, and in both films, Christoph Waltz plays a German intelligence officer who's a prisoner of war, being taken out by Ian Fleming to a hotel bar to try and get information out of him in London.
I thought you were going to end it there, being taken out by Ian Fleming.
But actually, with in the Connery Fleming biopic, that probably could have happened, given that something that one. It's very cartoonish. We have at the beginning, Fleming is thrown out of Sandhurst when he's found in bed with a woman, and the woman, in fact, is played by Kate Humble, of all people. Yeah.
Right, the TV presenter.
Yeah.
Right, okay. All right.
Yeah. And there was also a Bond biopic miniseries with Dominic West. No, not Dominic West. Dominic
Cooper.
Yeah.
Was it that? Yeah.
From about 2013, which was reasonably good.
Yeah.
That was nowhere near as cartoonish. It's not as realistic because though Fleming did quite interesting things during the Second World War, they weren't him being James Bond. So I don't think people have properly put that on screen. Stephen, have you seen Inglourious Basterds?
I have, yes. No, but not got much to add. But yeah, I very much enjoyed. But Christoph Waltz was the highlight of that film.
I think it's on tonight, actually, on Channel 4. So if anybody's out there wanting to watch it again.
If you've got nothing else to add, Steve, we'll move on to John's final pick.
So my last one is, this is probably my favourite World War II film. It's The Dirty Dozen. So, love this film. This is one that I'll always watch when it's on. It stands up to multiple viewings. There's just so much to like about this film. You've got a fantastic ensemble cast. So headed up by the late, great Lee Marvin. So that's, massive bonus points there, playing John Reisman, this kind of cynical OSS veteran who's then tasked or volunteered to lead a suicide mission of 12 convicts who are facing various sentences for murder, theft, insubordination, and so on, and take them on a mission to a chateau where the Germans go for R&R, essentially. So they're there to go infiltrate the chateau and kill as many high-ranking Germans as they possibly can, and that's it. So you've got Lee Marvin, John Cassavetes, Telly Savalas, Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, Richard Jekyll, Donald Sutherland, Clint Walker, I think, was Clint Howard. I always get those names mixed up. Really good cast, and great characters as well. Are you introduced to on this? Marvin goes to the military prison where they're all being held, and you get this little snapshot of each character as he kind of interviews them in their cells. I think it's about two hours long, something like that, maybe a little bit longer, but it packs in so much into its sort of runtime, going from the recruitment to the training where he tries to whip these people into shape, some of whom are trying to escape, and then various training missions. One where they get caught after one phase of the training. Marvin decides to reward them by bringing in a load of booze and a bunch of local prostitutes to keep the men entertained. They all get caught by Marvin's sort of enemy, Colonel Breed, who's a very sort of like a stick in the mud, stickler for the rules type guy. All looks like the mission's going to go completely wrong, and they're all going to get sent back to prison. So then they have to prove themselves by going up against Colonel Breed's elite airborne forces. So some really good scenes there. And then obviously you've got the mission itself. But there's just great performances in this film. Some great lines of dialogue as well in it. There's a scene where they go to do the airborne training at Colonel Breed's camp, and he thinks there's an important general coming along. So Lee Marvin has to say, right, somebody in here has to be a general. So he turns to Donald Sutherland, who's playing this kind of like just, go along to get along kind of guy, and says, right, Pinkley, how'd you fancy being a general? He's like, I'd rather be a civilian, sir. Like, little lines like that in it. Great stuff from John Cassavetes playing Victor Franco, who's this kind of mob-connected thief who just wants to get out of this, trying to escape all the time. Very antagonistic. Telly Savalas plays this religious maniac, Archer Maggot. It's just great. Just anybody who hasn't seen it, I'd recommend going to watch it. And it's brutal when you actually look at the ending, how it actually ends and what they do to achieve the mission. Considering it was filmed in the 60s, I think it was made in the mid to late 60s. Given what they do to the Germans towards the end, it's on par with almost like Inglourious Bastards in terms of like the bloodthirstiness when you look at it. But yeah, very good film. Really good film. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, very much so. And one also the general then is played by Bernard Ellis Borgnine, who is very entertaining in it.
Yes, he is. Yeah, there's some great. I think Lee Marvin's got such a comedic, such a dry tone to him. Just the little ways he comes across stuff when he's talking to Borgnine. When he's first given the mission, he sees that his enemy, Colonel Breed, sat outside, and he's just sort of sat there. Marvin, he says, "Happen to know Colonel Breed? Happen to notice Colonel Breed was sat outside. I was just wondering if he had anything to do with this mission." And Borgnine's, "What if he does?" Marvin's just like, "I'd be most unhappy, sir." And then Borgnine's like, "What are you doing? You're here to follow orders." So yeah, really, really good dry tone to him, Lee Marvin, in this. I think it's one of his best ones, definitely.
Yeah, and there's I can't remember the actor's name, George something. He plays Borgnine's sort of right-hand man, and when they're on the and they're on the exercise, and he's one of the sort of referees.
Yeah,
they sort of watching him acting. His reaction to what they're getting up to is really funny.
Yeah, there's some great character moments in it as well. I think just that it's probably overlooked with how they inform character by just the little scenes and the little character reactions as a group as well. The bit where Reisman's teaching them how to disarm somebody with a knife, and he provokes the big, you've got the stereotypical characters. You've got Clint Walker playing Posey, who's this big, well-built guy who's kind of slow, gentle giant, but when he goes kind of thing. So he uses him as a bit of a kind of demo tool and provokes him into attacking him with a knife. And just as it's starting to build, you can see things getting out of hand. You can see all the other characters, how they react to it. Telly Savalas, the maniac, is just like laughing his head off. John Cassavetes, who's antagonistic to Reisman's, like going, stick him, shouting at him, like trying to cheer him on, stab him. All the rest, everybody else is looking a bit sick as how this is going to go off. So just great little moments like that,
Yeah. Well, I think I should just say that there are sequels to it, and they are not as good. I would say the best of the sequels is the first one, which was made about 20 years later, and it has Lee Marvin and Ernest Borgnine in there, and you can see they've aged 20 years.
I think one of them's got Telly Savalas in as well, hasn't it? Coming back as another character entirely different character.
Yeah, he's in the second sequel, because I think Lee Marvin died after that. The first one. So he takes over into it's and then there's a TV series which I've not seen, which was made in the 80s, I think, off the back of the films, but I've no idea if they're any good or not. The TV series any good or not.
Yeah, I'd say just stick to the original. There is a sequel to the original novel by E.M. Nathan. So I've got it, which I've not yet read. I found this on a Dirty Distant War. So this follows up not too long after the original mission. It's another mission with John Reisman, the Lee Marvin character, in it. And I think this one's set in Burma. So we were mentioning Burma a little bit earlier. So again, not yet read this one. It's just one of those that, when you find a book, you think, right, I'll have that. Yeah. That's going on the massive to be read sort of list. But so I'll let you know what that one's like. And but I don't believe that one was filmed at all. I don't think they ever filmed any. I think that's the only sequel that Nathanson wrote to the original.
Yeah. If you've got nothing else, if anybody's got nothing else to add, we'll move on to Stephen's last pick.
Yes, so my last pick was actually, for a change of pace, I thought we'd do a Downfall, which is, of course, a German film. And, of course, the subject of many memes, which I'm sure we've all seen. But it's actually a really, really good and really haunting film about sort of the final days of the war, of the Nazi regime, as the Soviets are moving in on Berlin, and sort of basically just what went on, what happened, and the sort of gradual shift of delusion to despair, and then, of course, hence the title, the end, the downfall of the regime. And yeah, I mean, I think I've seen it twice now, but it's really carried by Bruno Gange as Hitler. It's really, it's quite an eerie rendition of him and what it was like, especially at the end. I mean, down to like his, I think he had some condition with his arm, which is always shaking, and then of course the famous rages he goes into. But also, I mean, it's just the whole atmosphere of Berlin as it's all coming to an end. You know, when they've got children manning the machine gun posts, and I mean, there's also good scenes with the Russians, and so I mean, it sort of gets through kind of the chaos of war. I mean, I think it might just be in the director's cut, but there's a good scene with the Russians where when the Germans do come to surrender, the Russian sort of general panics because he's not actually got enough guys with him, so he gets his just sort of privates, and he sort of gives them just random medals and tells them to just sit around the table and look sort of as if they're important sort of officers to make it look more impressive. And so it's full of stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a really good film. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I saw it. Unfortunately, I saw it after all the Hitler rants memes, so that gave it a slightly different perspective on it. But it's really, really good film. It's quite like you say, quite haunting sort of film, and that performance by the Bruno Gantz, did you say his name was it?
Yes, yeah.
Excellent performance by him. Really, really good film. Very good film.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good film. I think it's the best one of showing that sort of those final days. There is another film that was made in the 80s called The Last Days of Adolf Hitler, or The Last Days of the Third Reich, with Anthony Hopkins playing Hitler in the bunker. And that's all right, but it's nowhere near as good. Downfall is the best portrayal I think I've seen of this, sort of the final days of the Third Reich, and also the Battle of Berlin, which, other than a very, very famous, or say infamous Soviet propaganda film about Berlin, which I can't remember the name of now, but it's infamous for being sort of all the stereotypes you have about Soviet propaganda. This film meets them and then goes overboard. And so I think this is one of the few, Downfall is one of the few films that really does get those final days really well done, both in terms of what's going on in the Führer bunker, but also what's going on in Berlin as well. You get to see the Battle of Berlin being portrayed, which I'm not sure, again, if that had been portrayed on screen in a big budget film in any way, other than that Soviet film before. It's one of those, unlike, for example, D-Day or Operation Market Garden or Stalingrad, that is sort of a real sort of cauldron battle, but rarely gets portrayed on screen for some reason.
What was the initial sort of response to Downfall when it first came out? I can't really, was it well received? Did it do well?
I remember critics really praising it. I remember it because I used to collect movie magazines at that time, and it was always showing up in them.
Right.
There was quite a big deal made out of it.
Yeah, I think it was pretty universally well received in the English-speaking world. I think there was some controversy in Germany itself over the film. And then, of course, there was some sort of awkwardness. The fact that I think some critics felt that it had overly humanized a lot of the sort of leading Nazi figures, which I see the point, but I don't really agree with that. I think it just sort of showed them as they were, as best you could. I think the scene with the Goebbels family is really haunting. Because of course that's actually what he did to his own children. So yeah, but I think broadly it was pretty well received.
I think on the point of humanising members of that regime, I've always found that people who criticise that are sort of missing the point. Yes, they were evil,
yes, definitely,
but they weren't evil because they were these inhuman caricatures. They were evil because they were human and they believed in a certain set of ideas. And if you portray them as sort of these moustache twirling villains, you're denigrating the true extent of the evil they committed. And so you should try and humanise them to show them as they actually were, and that makes the horror of what they did even more sort of hit harder.
I certainly don't remember any of that kind of demonising them when I was at school learning about this in history classes. I just remember I think this is certainly something that's moved on as we've moved through time. I can remember my history teachers, because we studied this that was part of the syllabus. Well, they were very matter of fact about it all, just very kind of, this is what they were like, this is why they did this is why they thought the way they did. Just again, they weren't they didn't apologize for them, they didn't overly humanize them, but they just said it factually. They weren't these like you say, they weren't demonic creatures or like you say, mustache twirling villains or anything else like this, and it gave you a better understanding of why or how it happened anyway.
Yeah, I'll just bring up a comment. Absolutely, yeah. Just bring up one more comment. Hopefully, Peter's still here. Hello, Peter. If you're on X
Hi,
and you're on one of my mutuals, you know Peter is Paul, who does very entertaining tweets.
It does.
So, if nobody else has got anything to add, I'll move on to my last pick, which is a film that I regard as superior to Saving Private Ryan, which is The Longest Day from 1964, which portrays the D-Day landing from a few days before the D-Day landing through to, I think, D-Day plus 1 or 2, maybe, I think plus 1, maybe. And you see it from the point of view of American troops landing at Normandy, and paratroopers, British troops landing at Normandy, and paratroopers, the French resistance, the German soldiers fighting, senior German generals and the officers fighting both on the coastal defences and in the Luftwaffe. And also you get to see sort of elements of the French forces, so the resistance and also French commandos. And you see the very sort of notable parts of it. I think they portray. I can't remember if it's Omaha or Utah Beach. The one the Americans had the real big difficulty in taking. That's portrayed, and really well. And then of course there's Pegasus Bridge, where you have. I should say this is an all-star cast film of sort of prominent actors in the late 60s, early 60s, late 50s from both the US and the UK and Germany. So we've got, and in the Pegasus Bridge scene, you have the British commander being played by Richard Todd, who was in fact at Pegasus Bridge in 1944 as a paratrooper. And so he's playing his own commanding officer, and there's actually an actor in one of those scenes playing Richard Todd. And then, of course, you have the 82nd Airborne commander, General Gavin, being played by John Wayne, who is about 20 years too old to play the character. And you have Robert Mitchum, who's the main American character on the beach landings. And there's a very, very funny scene with Gold Beach, where you have a couple of British soldiers, one of whom is played by Sean Connery, in a very small, very entertaining scene where they're coming off the landing craft, and then they have an interaction with the beach master, who was a real man, played by Kenneth Moore, who's got a bulldog, and he's sort of getting everybody moving. And one of the Bren gun carriers, the universal carriers, isn't working, so he just comes up with his walking stick, smacks it, and the engine immediately starts afterwards. And my favourite scene is actually the scene where the French commandos attack the German, the small town, and they go in and they knock out the gun, and they. It's interesting because you get to see it a lot from a overview, so you get to see the French. Initially, when you're watching the scene, you don't see the French commandos. It isn't until they move that you can see exactly where they are, and so it gives you a good idea of what it would have been, what the Germans would have seen when the French attacked. And it's a really good film. And it's also unusual in sort of English language films, World War II films, of showing the Free French forces other than the resistance. And there's also sort of nice small minor characters like Gert Frobe appears in the film as a German, a very overweight German sergeant who arrives at his post every morning on a donkey. And then there's also a very nice scene of a French resistance member who's a Frenchman. He lives on the coast, and so he's reporting to the resistance. And then when the British take June Beach, I think Juno or Gold Beach, he arrives on his bike with a sash and a helmet with champagne cheering them all on. And you've got an interestingly, this is a film that quite a lot of actors wanted to be in. So Richard Burton was making Cleopatra at the time, and he was so sort of bored with that film. He begged, I I think it was Daryl Zanuck who was the producer of the executive producer of Longest Day, to give him a role, and so that's why he's in it as the RAF pilot. And I think there were a number of other actors who were on other productions, and they asked to be on it, and they just let him in. So that's why there's 42 stars in the film. The interesting thing is that Dwight D. Eisenhower was still alive at that point, and he actually suggested that he could play himself if they could make him look young enough. They couldn't do that, so they ended up employing the man who ended up playing Eisenhower in the film was a sound guy who had no acting experience before, and he didn't act in anything afterwards. But they picked him purely because he looked just like Eisenhower in 1944. And of course, he's got the great dun 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 sort of theme music, and it's based on a book by Cornelius Ryan called The Longest Day, and which of course Cornelius Ryan is famous for writing another book that got adapted into another World War II epic in 1977, The A Bridge Too Far. And so I see this as those two as sequel. A Bridge Too Far is a sequel to Longest Day in my mind, and though I would say A Longest Day is the better film because A Bridge Too Far has its issues, shall we say, with history and the way it portrays certain elements of the British Armed Forces in that film. But again, this is one of those films as if you would see on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. That's been a while. I think, that and like you mentioned about The Bridge Too Far. I think, and Saturday afternoon type films, and quite long films, if I remember right. So I think they're definitely ones that I've probably seen, maybe not all in one sitting, but several times, coming back and forward and in and out, if you like, as you're potting around doing things. But I can remember liking them. Again, they just fit into that mold, don't they, of that type of film that was produced at that time. So very good.
Yeah, I think they're not 3 hours long, but they both get close to it in sort of screen time. And as I say, I think The Longest Day is better than Saving Private Ryan when it comes to the depiction of D-Day.
What's your criticism of Private Ryan?
Oh, because other than the opening sequence, it's portrayed as being a D-Day film, but after the opening sequence, which is magnificent and great, it then becomes a sort of typical action film, if you know what I mean. Whereas Longest Day is a proper portrayal of D-Day. It's obviously got elements that have to be changed for narrative purposes, but it gives you a good idea in that film of what happened on D-Day. Whereas, whilst Saving Private Ryan, the opening, gives you a good idea of what it was like to get off a landing craft and have to storm the beach, that's where it begins and ends in terms of D-Day.
A short sequence, yeah.
Yeah. Since I mentioned it, I will just say that the criticisms I have of A Bridge Too Far is the fact that it portrays the British Armoured Division as not willing to willing to go into Arnhem because they want to stop for a tea break, which is not true. And it makes General Gavin, who appears in A Bridge Too Far as well, played by Ryan O'Neill, as being somebody who could see what was going on, whereas frankly, Gavin, along with Browning, the British commander, both deserve the blame for why the real operation in Operation Mochagon went wrong, because they didn't take the Wrightsfold, which was the forest, when they could have, and the 82nd Airborne could have secured a bridge. Then they didn't, and the Germans were able to secure it, and meant that there were delays getting to Arnhem, and a lot of the sort of ideas about why Operation Market Garden failed, which are false, are perpetuated by A Bridge Too Far, even though that is a great war film. And that was actually something criticised at the time. Dirk Bogarde, who plays us Browning, sort of tried to take his name off the film because he was on Browning's staff during the Second World War, and he felt the portrayal of Browning was, and the sort of portrayal of the operation wasn't accurate. So that's why I regard A Bridge Too Far to be not as good as Longest Day, which, as I say, has its changes because it's a film, but it's fundamentally a reasonably accurate portrayal of D-Day. Stephen, have you seen The Longest Day?
I have, yeah, very much. It was actually on my honourable mentions list, along with A Bridge Too Far. Just on the amusing stuff, I do always remember there's a scene with the American paratrooper sort of practicing his French in the plane that always sort of makes me laugh. But it's a really good film. Yeah, I'd very happily watch it again despite its long run time. And then I agree about I do prefer it to Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah,
because it is actually about the sort of the scale and of the operation of D-Day more than the sort of personal story, which the later film is more about.
Yeah, and actually one thing I will mention about Bridge Too Far, not to go on about it too much, that scene which portrayed where I think it's Robert Redford, who's the American paratroop officer, asking why the British tanks aren't going in. The British character is a fictional stand-in for a real person, and you can understand why, given what happens in that film, they didn't portray the real person, because the real person was Lord Carrington, who was, in a few years after the film came out in 1977. Well, the film came out in 1977. Lord Carrington would, in 1979, become the British Foreign Secretary. And if they portrayed that actor as Carrington, he would have sued and won, because he repeatedly through his life kept having to come back and correct this myth that was really propagated by A Bridge Too Far.
Interesting. That's quite a thing with a lot of war movies, isn't it?
Yeah, but with A Bridge Too Far, because it was based on a non-fiction book, people sort of the inaccuracies were treated. Well, the inaccuracies were taken more seriously as reality, if you understand me. Whereas in something like any sort of film, it's a normal sort of war film that portrays, say, myths about the Second World War that's not based on that. That can be forgivable, but with A Bridge Too Far, that's really not. So, there's anybody? I know that Stephen said he's got some honourable mentions. If you've got any honourable mentions, we can sort of go through them. So, if we start with you, Steve, and then go on to John, and then Stephen, and then come to me.
Yeah, sure. Memphis Belle. That's one I liked a lot. It was about the lads in the B-12 bomber. Had a good cast. It's Matthew Modine, Eric Stoltz. It came out sort of late 80s, early 90s, and it's just a good movie about the lads in the situation, basically, and it's kind of a feel-good movie as well in a lot of ways. So, and it was at a time where, I said before, there weren't a lot of World War II movies being made. There was kind of like a big gap in those sort of movies, I think, and hardly any of them in the 80s that I can think of apart from that. Yeah, it's just a great movie.
Yeah. John, do you have any honourable mentions?
Kelly's Heroes.
Yeah.
As a fun sort of caper type one about Clint Eastwood. Was it Clint Eastwood, Telly Savalas, and Donald Sutherland in it, playing this gang of sort of soldiers off to go and find some Nazi gold behind the lines. So again, just good fun caper film. on a more serious note, I'd say The Hill with Sean Connery in it, which is about a military detention center in North Africa, I think it is, where Connery, it's basically where they mete out various punishments to soldiers who are in prison for whatever reason, insubordination and so on, by forcing them to climb this hill repeatedly in the hot sun. It's just a bit, essentially, it's a prison drama, essentially, quite hard edged. And then I'd say my last one really is a bit last honourable mention is A Matter of Life and Death.
Yeah.
With David, is it David Niven?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who plays a RAF pilot who dies on a mission, but then it's found out up in heaven that it wasn't his time. So he has to essentially go through a kind of court case with the celestial angels to justify why he should be returned to life as opposed to dying. So it's is it Pressburger and
Powell Pressburger.
Powell Pressburger, yeah. So it's good, yeah, just a fable more than anything else, you know, but a good, enjoyable film.
Yeah. Actually, just to add on to that, another honourable mention to go as a sort of a companion piece for Matter of Life and Death is, of course, The Life and Death of Colonel Bogey, which has Roberts. I forgot his name now. He appears in Matter of Life and Death. He plays General Candy, Clive Candy, through his career from
Donut, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's not Donuts. Donut. It's Robert something or other, Welsh actor.
Who was in Matter of Life and Death? Was he the?
He was the doctor.
The doctor, yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're on about, yeah. I can't think what his name is now.
Found him, Roger Livesey.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great actor, very entertaining as well. Stephen, Murray, you've mentioned a couple of honourable mentions already. Have you got any more?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I'll try and keep it brief, but yeah, there's Das Boot. Of course, it's about German U-boats. In addition to Bridge Too Far and the Cruel Sea is another one. And of course, did we mention Bridge on the River Kwai? Because that was also in my honourable mentions. Yeah. Oh, and 12 o'clock High. Also with Gregory Peck. It's a really good film.
Yeah, I mean, with 12 O'Clock High is really good, and Cruel Sea has that is really a wonderful film. It's in some ways it's sort of the Royal Navy, like sort of the Royal Navy version of The Way Ahead, where you are following a ship's crew throughout the whole war, and you have that very famous scene. Not to spoil it, but with the depth charges, and that is. It's a great film, but that's the best scene in the whole film, and it's the most affecting scene in the film.
It's also I don't know if it's just anecdotal, but apparently it's a bit of a tradition at the Navy to to watch it, and then to get sprayed with beer every time there's a wave goes over the ship.
Yeah. With my honourable mentions, there's the Sea of Sand from 1958, which is the plot is essentially about the long-range desert group going on operation just before El Alamein to blow up a German, I think it's a petrol dump. And of course, there's a couple of other mentions which essentially have the same plot as Sea of Sand are Tobruk from 1967, and also Raid on Rommel from 1971, and they have in Tobruk it's Sea of Sand we've got Richard Attenborough in. Tobruk has got Rock Hudson and Nigel Green in, and in a role where I think they must have had to draw him out, Richard Burton in Raid on Rommel, and they all essentially have the same plot, but they're all really good films, entertaining. Sea of Sand is the best, though. I've got to say I'm fondest of Tobruk. And I've got to mention this one because if we don't, all the British war film fans will be complaining in the comments. Battle of Britain, 1969, which tells the story of the Battle of Britain in 1940 and has, unusual for a film about that, not unusual for the era, but unusual now, is the fact all the planes are real and they're all from the era. I think it's that film in terms of the planes is very historically accurate, and it's really good. It's got very numerous sort of famous lines. The famous one, Downing being played by Laurence Olivier, saying, "We our boys have got to shoot more of their boys to win." And the sort of various scenes of showing the RAF pilots having to scramble when the Germans arriving, and the Germans attacking the airfields, trying to wipe out the RAF. Really good film. Interestingly, the character played by Robert Shaw was based on a real man, a South African, who served in the RAF during the Second World War and went back to South Africa and was opposed to apartheid. He set up an organisation called the Torchlight Commandos, who were South Africans, white South Africans, usually Anglo-South Africans, opposed to apartheid, which is interesting. And another honourable mention would be The Big Red One by Sam Fuller, which follows a US platoon under a veteran sergeant to cross North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and then into Normandy and into Germany itself. Really good film. It's from the same sort of period as Memphis Belle, where there weren't too many World War II films, but it really entertaining one. And if you're actually, a comment earlier mentioned this. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, Sean mentioned this. If you somebody's played a lot of the Call of Duty games, if you ever played the Call of Duty 2, a Big Red One, and you see the film, it will seem familiar because the Call of Duty producers for that film essentially just nicked the plot and nicked most of the characters for it as well. They just didn't put in the main side, the sort of veteran sergeant played by Lee Marvin in it. Yeah. That's pretty much all my honourable mentions. So, I think given that we're going up to 2 hours and 20 minutes, we'll sort of bring things to a close here. First, I'd like to say thank you to Steve, John, and Stephen for coming on again. Hopefully, you can come on next month as well. And if anybody watching this has any World War II films that they're fans of that they want me to watch or want any of us to watch, just leave a comment down below, and I'll certainly watch them. So thank you for coming on.
Right, thanks for having me. Thanks.
Always a pleasure,
Nice
mate.
to speak to you all
Thanks
again.
as always, Aaron. Yeah, cheers very much.
Okay, with that, I'll say goodbye. BookTube. Bye.